Culture Plan Youth e-learning platform. Welcome to following our Moodle courses. The Italian creative and cultural sector. 1. Introduction. 2. The historical relevance of the creative and cultural sector in Italy. 3. The empowerment of young Italians in the creative and cultural sector. 4. Study case. Appendixes. Application. Course outputs. This course is a part of the Erasmus Plus project, getting young people and young adults included and engaged in the cultural and creative sectors, with number ID 20201 DK01 KA227 ADU 094215. The aims of this course are: provide all the key skills to have a general perspective of the Italian creative and cultural sector, know the methods to support young professionals in the Italian creative and cultural sector, give facilitators cues to prefer innovative teaching methods based on learn by doing through digital tools. Introduction: the effects of COVID-19 on the creative and cultural sector in Italy. From the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic until November 2022, alarming data was found in Italy: 23,322,522 infected, 178,542 dead, 523,696 active, 251,357,139 swabs with a positivity rate of 9.28%, 300,000 plus businesses that closed in 2020 alone. The damage caused by the COVID has had repercussions on families, but also on the government, society, the economy, and culture. In fact, an important factor to take into consideration concerns the Italian creative and cultural sector and the repercussions it has had due to COVID-19. To explain the influence of COVID on the Italian creative and cultural sector, we have to make a difference between two thematic areas: cultural industry, youth culture, and education. Cultural industry. In Italy, even before COVID, the numbers of users of the creative and cultural sector were quite low. In fact, it is recorded that only 48% of men and 45.8% of women participated in a cultural event within a year. The reason for this low percentage comes from two main factors: general disinterest and unfavorable economic conditions. From this it can be deduced that almost exclusively the rich visit places of culture in Italy. In fact, taking into account the highest income bracket, 63% of the population has visited a cultural site. COVID has only made this situation worse. In 2020, cinemas and performance venues had a maximum of 67 days of ordinary operation, 124 contingent reopenings, and 165 days of total closure. While museums and libraries recorded 173 days of reopenings partial and 126 days of total closure. From an economic point of view, we can quantify a loss in the Italian creative and cultural sector of €745 million. Fortunately, the Italian government, during and after the COVID-19 period, has aimed to support the Italian creative and cultural sector through the allocation of €110 million for the audiovisual sector, €400 million plus for the single fund for entertainment, €20 million for temporary economic support, €100 million for the Cultural Heritage Protection Fund, just under €70 million for the financing of cultural institutions, €60 million tax credit for the purchase of printed paper. In favor of newspaper and periodical publishing companies, €40 million for libraries and bookstores, €10 million in tax credit to support independent bookstores, €90 million for the Extraordinary Fund for Interventions to support publishing, €220 million for the 18 App Culture Bonus. A bonus worth €500 provided by the Ministry of Culture to all 18-year-olds to be able to make purchases in cinemas, cultural events, books, museums, and monuments. Furthermore, as a support to Italian cinema, the tax credit was stabilized at 40% thanks to the increase in the investment fund in the film world. The numbers previously defined describe a general trend of the actions promoted by the Italian government in support of the creative and cultural sector, but are by way of example, not exhaustive. Youth culture and education. COVID-19 has brought devastating social and economic consequences all over the world. One of the major consequences concerns young people and the strong impact they had with the event. In Italy, there are very worrying data regarding the correlation between young people, education, and the world of work following the COVID-19 pandemic. Census, in its 55th report on the social situation of the country, highlights how out of 571 school managers in Italy, 81% affirm an exponential increase in the phenomena of depression and existential discomfort of pupils following the COVID pandemic. Common opinion has maintained that distance learning is to blame for these phenomena, but studies carried out by experts state the opposite. Indeed, it is confirmed that the major cause of depression was dictated by the absence of extracurricular activities, which constituted the main meeting and socialization places for students. Here are some facts about young Italians after the COVID-19 pandemic. 70% of students experience a sharp drop in attention. 1 in 4 young people have symptoms of depression. 76.8% of school leaders say that children do not have clear future prospects. The number of young people suffering from eating disorders has increased. 2 out of 5 14-year-olds started high school with a 5th grade preparation. 1 in 2 college graduates finished high school as skilled as a middle school student. 40% of young people go out much less after COVID. 40% of young people say they no longer, or practice less, their hobby/sport. 74% search for news stories more than ever before. The major cause of discomfort and inhibition of young people is the lack of adequate cultural education. Young people, not being adequately stimulated towards the creative and cultural sector, have difficulty in being creative, proactive, and in living their lives to the fullest, placing insurmountable barriers due to ignorance. The historical relevance of the creative and cultural sector in Italy. Italy is a nation founded on culture. The innumerable populations that have lived on these lands have left behind a cultural heritage of historical significance. Since ancient times, culture has been the object of power, beauty, and perfection. The leaders of every civilization have always been individuals who have made culture a weapon to involve all those who did not have the same knowledge. Although Italy has only existed since 1861, its culture has much older origins. Among the populations that have most developed the production and cultural importance in Italy, we find the Greeks, the Etruscans, and the Romans. The latter were the first to unify the Italian territory and to unite its cultural diversity. Italian culture can therefore be seen as a set of small unified cultures. From this fusion, Latin was born, the basis on which all Neo-Latin languages developed, including Italian. Going forward in history, culture has been used as a means of power, of historical representation of facts, of claiming one's supremacy, but also of rebellion. The most characteristic trait of Italian culture concerns art. The main artistic movements developed in Italy are Byzantine art, Romanesque art, Gothic art, Renaissance art, 400, Renaissance art, 500, maximum period of Italian artistic production and diffusion in Europe, Mannerism, Baroque art, Neoclassical art, Romantic art. The great cultural history of Italy has made it one of the most attractive places in the world from a historical cultural point of view. Walking through the cities, you can easily see architectural works built over 1,500 years ago. The Italian conception of art presents an interesting dogma. Why, despite Italy being homeland of culture, does the Italian people seem uninterested in it? Italians are used to being surrounded by culture. For this reason they are unable to enhance it, taking it almost for granted, while more attention should be paid to what surrounds us. Starting from the Italian language, passing through museums and sculptures, up to artistic productions, every city in Italy has a centuries-old cultural background. A further factor that demonstrates the importance of culture in the development of Italian history concerns the traditions and myths. The same Italian customs and traditions are nothing more than the evolution of millenary traditions, initially handed down orally, to then be written, recited and preserved. The professionalization of young Italians in the creative and cultural sector. In Italy, the labor market situation in the creative and cultural sector is atypical, due to low wages and a mismatch between labor supply and demand. In Italy, there are many young people who follow higher education courses in the area of cultural disciplines, an element due to the history of the nation, but for them, the idea of working in the creative and cultural sector remains a dream, sometimes impossible to achieve. In Italy, there are 791,000 workers in the creative and cultural sector, and of this number, only 10.2% are aged between 15 and 29. In 2007, the European Parliament approved the resolution on the social status of artists, but, despite this, precariousness and underpaid work act as a barrier to the professionalization of young people in these sectors. What are the measures aimed at enhancing youth empowerment in CCS? The government, thanks to the collaboration of the European Union, has decided to dedicate a large part of the resources to the strengthening of young professionals in the world of culture. In particular, we can find the funds of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, PNRR, and the funds of the Next Generation EU. What can we do to support young people? Art and culture are means of expression and communication. To encourage creative and cultural expression, there is therefore the need to apply non-formal teaching methods, aimed at practical development and increasing the curiosity of young people towards art and culture, laying solid foundations and giving the motivation so that they abandon their path, but persist until their goals are achieved. A support for youth professionalization in the CCS, the digitization of the creative and cultural sector. During the COVID-19 period, despite the serious damage caused by the pandemic to the Italian creative and cultural sector, the impossibility of participating in events and going out led workers in this sector to move towards a process of digitization of art and culture. From publishing, to tourism, to artistic production, everything related to the cultural sector has been rendered in digital form. In a world that revolves around social media and the web in general, the digitization process has broken down many barriers that separated citizens from culture, making any material usable even from their own homes. But the digitization of art does not stop at cultural dissemination, but can be used as a non-formal teaching method to bring young people closer to the creative and cultural sector. What is non-formal learning? According to URC, non-formal learning is a process characterized by an intentional choice by the student, which takes place outside formal systems. One of the major facilitators of this learning process is technology. Non-formal learning is based on the development of the latent abilities of each individual, who, intentionally, will have the opportunity to apply the subject matter of study to their knowledge and skills, strengthening their critical spirit and creativity. Thanks to this type of teaching, young people have the opportunity to maximize their transversal skills and to develop hard skills that otherwise would have remained hidden. The practice of learn by doing is the beating heart of non-formal learning, in fact a type of teaching based on the practicality of the notions of interest applied to daily life is favored. How to apply non-formal learning to CCS? The non-formal learning process is a permanent process to which young people are subjected throughout the day, because all young people are on social media or on the internet and are constantly bombarded with information, increasing their cultural baggage. The skill of a facilitator, in this case, is represented by the ability to provide young people with the right material to refer to and to give the correct guidelines for individual, not collective, development. Non-formal learning methods marry perfectly with art and culture, the creative and cultural sector is based on the expression of the workers of this sector. This means that to preserve our cultural production and to bring young people closer to the CCSW, it is the need to make every young person a protagonist, giving guidelines that are of a general nature, but leaving the possibility for the student to develop his or her work independently. What tools to use? The web is therefore an indispensable resource for training, but we must be careful not to draw sources from the wrong portals. The biggest problem that has developed following the advent of digitization is disinformation. The ease of coming into contact with the cultural and creative world has led to the spread of fake news. By way of example, but not limited to, the following are some platforms through which facilitators will have the opportunity to apply non-formal learning methods to their students, without incurring the risk of disinformation. ItalyArt.it, Art at 360 Degrees, a website where you have the opportunity to take a virtual tour of all the artistic and cultural heritage of our country. The Pinacoteca di Brera, a site that offers the public the opportunity to have an immersive museum experience. Thanks to its over 600 digitized works of art, the Uffizi Galleries. On the Uffizi website you can find a 360 degrees virtual tour, digitized artistic productions and also the works present in Palazzo Pitti and the Boboli. Gardens, Internet Cultural.it, website promoted by the Italian Ministry of Culture, MIC, and by the Central Institute for the Single Catalog, ICCU. Here you have the opportunity to take advantage of a vast historical cultural archive. Study case. Draw the music. Among the multiple methods of non-formal learning, an exercise will now be explained that helps to stimulate the creativity of young people, combining art and music. With the aid of an interactive whiteboard or a monitor, the facilitator have to open the link in the slide. The following screen will appear. Then press the button, Start Experiment, and select one of the 4 templates from which to start. Once the template has been selected, the following screen will appear. Explanation of the functions. At the bottom left are the keys for selecting the type of musical instrument from which the melody. At the bottom right there are the keys to delete the drawing, cancel the last modification in the sound manual. At the top right there is the button to exit the platform. At the top left are the keys for information, sharing and to return to the selection of templates. Finally, placing the cursor in the center you have the possibility to draw, thus starting the artistic musical experience. Procedure. The facilitator, after having illustrated the platform to young people, asks them, as homework, to express their emotions on the digital canvas and to share the sound and image with the teacher using the Share button. It is very important to make the young people understand that there are no mistakes during this exercise, because any trait will derive from the expression of a student's own feeling. Through this exercise every young person will have the opportunity to express what they feel in a double way, artistic and musical. The expressiveness of the young people will be evaluated, not the form.